Hello, good evening, everyone, and welcome to CMPS 3012 MIS. My name is Mrs. La-Dene Forrester Lambe. Allow me to welcome you to tonight's session. In our agenda, we would go over the live session objectives, where we are in the course, research phase 3, forum 4 guidelines, practical project number 4 guidelines as well, chapter 3 discussion questions, and we end with our case study presentations. Now, the purpose of these sessions is 1, to ensure that students understand what is due and when it's due, to ensure that you don't fall behind in your coursework. And we would like to spend some time discussing your forum and practical projects so that you can get the maximum points for each. In this unit, we also look at data for research. So we'll be walking you through the data collection process and all the steps that you need to consider. So where are we in the course? Let's go over to our Moodle page. And we are here at week 10 in unit number 4, and this is our theory week. So we know that we have 3 phases. There's theory, there's practical, and there's research. We are here at the theory week. And just an overview, the theory lecture will be presented. The live recording is already there on Moodle for you. Practical project 4 and the 4th research phase will be explained along with the benchmarks, which will be given to students to set the standards for work submitted. The relevance of the theory to the forum, practical project, and research will also be emphasized. This unit looks at ethics, social, and political issues raised by information systems. It's a very important area of information systems management, because you as information systems managers and consultants will have to interact with different types of persons who have conflicting views from time to time. You'll have to be concerned about where data is going to be stored, who has access to that data, and what they could do with the data, who should be held accountable, etc. So this chapter is very interesting as it looks at ethics. On Moodle, you'll be able to find the relevant slides as well as the pre-recorded lecture here in these 2 links. There's also the chapter discussion questions, which is followed by the course assessment segment of the theory week. And here you'll find your forum. Let's look at the forum instructions. And as usual, I always ask for a reader. So let me ask Miss Juana to read the instructions for us.
Good night, Miss. Has your data or work ever been compromised or misused? Or have you seen someone's data or work being used without their permission or misused? If you have shared a story with your classmate, don't include the person or persons renaming your story. Be sure to use fake names to tell your story. The misuse of data creates moral and ethical dilemmas, which chapter 4 presents. After sharing your story, explain how the person defended himself. In addition, had it been you, how would you defend yourself? Do additional research and place the steps that would need to be taken in the list to properly protect your data or work from being compromised. Note on each story placed up, students are required to respond by stating how they would defend themselves if they found themselves in the same predicament as the person in the story.
Thank you, Juana. So this one is very interesting, and you get to research, or if you don't have a story that you can relate to, you get to interview some of your peers and ask them if they have stories that they can share with you. It's important that you keep persons' information confidential. Now I have one that I can share with you, and this is of a situation I know. So I handle large sets of data from day to day, and some of those data are what you'd consider confidential. Now, because of the clearance that I have in the organization I work for, I have the responsibility of keeping that data secured. So if any of the information I have is shared or dispersed, then I would be held accountable. So that means I have to keep my computer safe, my room locked when I'm not there. If I step out for a minute, I lock my door and I take my keys with me. And there are only 2 other persons who has access to the data that I have access to. So if that information is shared at any point, it's one of us. Now, I have a friend who we're really close. She was actually my maid of honor. And she wants to know her husband's salary. He's never told her his salary from they've been married. And I think it's been more than 30 years now. And well, not that much, 20 years, sorry. So she wants to know, and I actually have access to that information. Should I share it with her? What do you guys think?
No, miss.
Yeah, miss, share the doubt. Tell her keep it between you and she, not make it get out there, because yeah, it could be that's his privacy, but same way that's your good friend.
All right, so I hear 2 different views, right? So
No, miss, you shouldn't, because that's not ethical.
Yeah.
I won't support that here. You never know. She you and she walk across and she got tell her, how old are you? Me tell her that kind of thing. Then I won't agree with that.
Or maybe you might tell her, sorry. Or maybe you might tell her the amount of money that he's making, and she thought that it was less or it was more, and she can't sleep at night. She keeps thinking about this constantly until finally she just speaks to him about it.
So it is a dilemma, and we see you guys witnessed it just now. There are different views. So some are saying yes, tell her. Some are saying no, don't. No, because I know that if I tell her, that would be a breach of contract. When I started working there, I had to sign a confidentiality oath for the government, for the organization, and I think there was another entity involved. But we had to sign all of these documents to say that we will never tell. So even if we have information, sometimes I'm listening to conversations and I might have information and your tongue is just itching to say, but you can't. So it's just like if you didn't know. And I hate being in that position. I don't know if any of you are in similar positions where you have information. Sometimes you would like to share, but you can't because you signed an oath and confidentiality is very important. So if you breach that, that's a breach of contract, and then legally you can be fined for that. So she's my friend, and then I feel so badly that I can go and actually check and tell her, but I don't. And the funny thing is her husband is in a department who can actually investigate to see my actions from my end. So he could actually check to see if I checked to see what his salary was. So it's a sticky situation. But choosing to do the right thing comes down to the individual at the end of the day. Many of us sign our contracts, we sign our oaths, we sign different documents that legally bind us, but the decision is still ours. And we see it in many of our departments, in our schools, in our classrooms. We see people cheating on tests. We see the corruption can start as simple things that we do, and so we have to decide as individuals what we will allow ourselves to do or not do, even though we know what the rules are, because at the end of the day, we have to live with the decisions that we make, and we have to understand that there are penalties to the actions that we commit. So for my friend, I hate knowing that I can tell her, but I don't do it because I still have a legal obligation to my organization. And at the end of the day, I don't want to get in the way of their marriage. They have a beautiful relationship, and I believe that it's his responsibility to tell her what he's making when he's ready. And though it's been over 20 years, I'm hoping that one day he will, right? So your ethical dilemma might be similar to mine or very different, but share a story. Don't give us any person's information, don't give us their actual name. Don't tell us where they work, but give us some context of a story and share your dilemma with us. And I believe that this should be a very interesting forum for the entire class, because we've all been in situations where we had hard decisions to make. Now, this forum becomes due on October 23rd. So you have some time to think about your stories and what you'd like to do. Now, your group assignment is a little different. It's still looking at ethics, but this time it's challenging you to develop some technical skills. Let's get another reader. Let me ask a male this time. Jalen, would you read for us?
With your group members, develop a corporate ethics code on privacy that addresses both employee privacy and the privacy of customers and users of a local organization or the University of Belize. Be sure to consider email privacy and employer monitoring of work sites, as well as corporate use of information about employees concerning their off-the-job behavior, example, lifestyle, marital arrangements, and so forth. Make sure that you include rules for what employees may or may not display in their social media accounts and explain why you would like to enforce these rules in the organization. Once complete, build a simple blog of your own design using Blogger. Be sure to name the blog code of ethics privacy policy. Post the policy as two separate posts, one for employee privacy and another as customer policy. Upload an image that helps justifies your policies. Note, give photo credit to the source of your image. In addition, be sure to add capabilities for users to provide comments. Once complete, prepare a 10-minute presentation of your blog.
Thank you, Jalen. So this one addresses the policies now, the rules that governs people's privacy and what they're allowed to share, and even looking at social media posts. A lot of companies now are evaluating you not only on your resume, but they also do background checks on LinkedIn and your social media. So they might go on your Instagram, they might go on your Facebook page and see what kind of content you're posting, just to find out what your character is like. So this chapter, this whole unit is looking more at what guides your life, what are your values, what are your principles, what are the things that governs you and the decisions that you would make. It's looking at what kind of freedoms in an organization we would give individuals, what guides us, what are our codes of ethics. Do we believe in integrity? Do we believe in trustworthiness? What are the pillars that we stand on? So you now get to imagine that as a group, you are a specific organization. You can decide which one. You create a policy for that organization by which your employees, as well as the customers, just making sure I have it right. Yes, so you have your customer policy, and then you also have your employee policy. So there are two policies that you need to create on Blogger. So Blogger is one of the tools that comes from the Google Suite as well, and you can look that one up in our set of classes next week. We'll be looking at how to use that tool just in case you haven't been able to research it. All right, so those are the main assignments that you'll be working on for this unit. The forum is due this Sunday. This practical project is due next week, Sunday. All right, any questions so far?
No, miss.
Okay, so when we had our presentations last, we said that groups were supposed to respond to Chapter 3 discussion questions. So quickly, I'm just going to ask each group leader to select one member from your group to share with us the response that you were able to come up with for each of these questions, right? So group 1 to 4, I'm just going to give you the questions according to the numbers, since that's how we normally go. So group 1's leader, you choose which of your group members you'd like to just respond to this question. Group 2, the same, group 3, and then group 4.
Okay, so For group 1, I will select Natasha, Nicholas.
Okay, so the question is on the screen. Natasha, you could read the question to the class and then just share your insights on it.
Which features of organizations do managers need to know about to build and use information systems successfully?
All right, can anyone help Natasha? Okay, it seems we're gonna have to come back to these questions then. So what I'm gonna do, groups, I will allow you to revisit these questions. We initially had planned to just respond to them at the end of your presentations, so we didn't get around to doing it. So when we meet on Thursday, we're gonna come back to these. I just wanna briefly go back over the instructions for the Moodle survey. I noticed a few of you were able to post, and those who were able to either send via email or on Moodle, I was able to put in the comments or send you a message that you could begin. There were a few persons who needed to go back over this though. In your survey, you do need just a little introduction, and that's just stating what's the purpose of your questionnaire. And then we have the different sections. So why do we have these sections? Well, in chapter 4, we'll start looking at the analysis of data. And we're using the La-Dene and McLean model, which assesses the successful implementation of information systems. In their model, they address several areas. There's information quality, system quality, complementary technology quality, service quality, user satisfaction, perceived net benefits. Now, in their assessment, they have several questions that they use, and the responses to these will allow them to create graphs, and these graphs will allow you to evaluate the different areas. So for perceived net benefits, you might notice that it scores low, or it might score a little higher than use, or user satisfaction, or service quality. After we have evaluated the different sections, and you'll notice there are questions under each. So the questions allows us to be able to determine how well each of these areas are being represented in the information system. For example, this group was looking at Moodle, and they used 3 questions that are seen here. The Moodle system is easy to use, it's user-friendly, it provides interactive features between users and the system. So the participants might have said, okay, I agree, so I'll give it maybe a 6. I'll give it, for question number 2 under this section, I'll give it a 6 as well. And it provides interactive features, I'll give it a 7. So you'll notice that this will score a little high if those were my responses. Now, if I was very dissatisfied with the system, I might have given it a 1 or a 2 or a 3. And then I would have realized that system quality scored very low in comparison to some of the other areas in the model. So this is the reason why we use these subheadings in our questionnaire. It's to help us to know what's the area being assessed, what are the questions that we're using to get our data, or to analyze our data rather, and then how are we going to be able to compare these different categories to the others. So this is the reason why we use it. All right, and for persons who were able to start already, we hope that you're able to get your responses in. On next week, I'll be going through the data analysis with you in more detail. So I'm hoping that by next week, you should have your responses in. Okay, so just a brief introduction, have your background information. This helps us to know who our participants are, what their demographics they fall into. And then from question 2 right up to the 8th category, those are based on the La-Dene and McLean framework that has these different criteria that we use to assess the success of information systems. All right, so with that said, I'm hoping that those who haven't submitted their questionnaires for review as yet, you will go back and ensure that these criteria are included in your questionnaire and that you have questions that support the evaluation of system quality, complementary technology quality, etc. So when you're sending out the surveys, another thing we ask instructors is just to add us as collaborators. The reason for this is we have to verify that you actually did send out the survey and get the data that you are sharing with us. So this is just for us, again, ethical reasons, to be able to prove that you didn't just take this data from some random place. Next week, we'll be looking at how we analyze data and how we write the research paper. There was a request from someone in this group to go back over the literature review. So we want to spend some time going over each part of your final project, what should be in each section, find out if you're having any issues coming up with the content for any of those, and assist you where we can. All right, so without further ado, I'm going to turn the floor over to tonight's presenters because we have some case study presentation.
Good night, everybody. Can you see me? Can you hear me and see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, okay. All right, so for my case study, I have Will Automation Kill Jobs? The case study summary goes like this. The advances in technology over the years has given rise to workforce automation. This simply means that robots are now completing the jobs that people do. While this may not be true for all companies, it is quite prevalent in the agriculture and manufacturing industries. For agriculture, we see automation with the machines and equipment now being used for planting and harvesting, as the work can be done more quickly and efficiently. In the manufacturing industry, automation is seen in automated assembly lines, material conveyor systems. Automation is mostly seen with the activities that are classified as repetitive. All right, so a study conducted by the Center for Business and Economic Research at Ball State University found that approximately 87% of manufacturing job losses between 2000 and 2010 was a result of companies aiming to become more efficient by adapting to automation and technology. There is also the McKinsey Global Institute report by Michael Chewy, James Manika, and Mehdi Miramati, which looked at potential job losses. They analyzed 2,000 distinct types of work activities in 800 occupations and found that 45% of these activities can be replaced by technology that already exists. Now, if we take a moment and just think about that and let that sink in, that's almost 50% of jobs that can be replaced by automation, by technology that already exists now. What would happen with new technology that is yet to come? However, there are positive aspects to automation. The elimination of jobs by automation creates opportunities for new jobs such as accountants, data analysts, but majority of the jobs that would be created are low-paying jobs like food service workers and home health aid. With the increase in automation, we may also see an increase in educational achievements as the new jobs created would require different skills and knowledge, which I'll go a little bit more in detail later on in the presentation. The first question of the case study states, does automating jobs pose an ethical dilemma? Ideally, automation is to improve the working life for thousands of people across the world. But at the same time, it is a cause for many people losing their jobs. One example of this would be the taxi industry, which could be greatly affected by self-driving cars. Many, if not all drivers would lose their jobs, but at the same time, switching to self-driving cars will cause fewer accidents and associated deaths, saving money and less traffic. So you may ask how switching to self-driving cars would cause fewer accidents and associated deaths, right? So by switching to self-driving cars, we would have less distracted, intoxicated drivers, which would reduce accidents, saving money and less traffic would come by. If there's anyone here who currently resides in Belize City, I'm sure you're aware of the morning traffic that we would experience here. One of the behaviors that was mentioned in the paper Benefits of Self-Driving Vehicles 2018 stated that the behavior of stop and go, where people would increase and decrease their speed, would cause traffic. By reducing this, they would reduce the traffic and also save money because they would be saving on fuel. Now, this entire situation creates an ethical dilemma because there's a decision that has to be made as to which would be the better option. Who are the stakeholders? When considering job automation, there are many stakeholders to consider. First off, we have business owners and managers who ideally would take into consideration the business and the profit that they would be making. You have the team members who currently manage the process on a daily basis and those who put something into the process. These would be considered as the employees, as they are the ones who would be doing the processes that would be automated. You have anyone who gets something out of the process. This would be considered as customers. Now, while going towards an automated process, the organization would also have to consider the fact that any products or services that they would come out from this would not be compromised. And then lastly, you have those who will do the work of automating the process, which is self-explanatory. So this would be the people who would actually program or reprogram the machines that would automate the process. And they ultimately have to benefit because they would be paid for this process. Now, what are alternatives and the potential consequences of each? So alternatives before actually switching to an automated process would be implementing a performance-driven compensation or workplace. So this would ultimately, this can have workers produce more, would produce higher work output that would be better performance. However, this can also have, it can also cause undue stress on workers if it is implemented incorrectly or unethically. And then we have investing in employee training and development, right? So while if an organization takes the time to invest in their employees by training them, giving them new skill sets, then they would be better equipped to perform their duties or new duties that would be required of them. However, this comes at an additional cost for the organization. And it can also come as an additional cost for the worker themselves, should they be the ones that decide that they need to invest in this training or this new skill set on their own. Now, if I were an owner of a factory deciding on whether to acquire robots to perform certain tasks, what people, organization, and technology factors would I consider? First off, we have the people. So we would consider the loss of employment and wages that the workers would experience. You have the work output that would become more complex. And this is because the process, the work, the tasks that would be automated would be lower level tasks. So now workers would then be taking up the responsibility of more complex duties, which would require more skills, training, and education. Under the organization, we have the benefits of automation, the cost of automation, and the maintenance of equipment and machinery. So under this section, we have ultimately the organization looking at the bottom line. Will automating processes be beneficial to them? And then lastly, we have technology. So the work output by robots is limited. They can only perform tasks that are programmed or pre-programmed, so they're not flexible to switch between tasks as humans would be able to do. Then you have the reprogramming or repairs that could take weeks or months to complete. And during this time, this downtime, the organization can be losing money because there's no work being done. How does this case study relate to the Belizean society? So Belize Brewing Company, I think, is a great local example of how automation has affected our country. Belize Brewing Company was established in 1969 and used a 43-year-old decommissioned solid copper 4-vessel brewery. This equipment was used up until 2000 when Belize Brewing Company commissioned their new brew house. The introduction of automation has allowed the company to expand and offer new products and improve existing products. So we all know that the beer of Belize is Belikin, and that's what Belize Brewing Company started off with. But now they're producing Lighthouse, you have Landshark Lager, you have seasonal brews like the Sorrel Stout or the Chocolate Stout. And excuse me, they are also bottling Heineken and Guinness, which is not a local product. So basically, they've been able to expand on their services and improving the existing products, because if you look now, you can find in stores at the Landshark, the Belikin Stout, they're being offered in cans instead of bottles. So this is a perfect example of both having positive and negative sides to automation, because while automating the process resulted in people losing their jobs, it also resulted in new and better jobs being as an outcome of the process. And these are my references for the research that I did, and that's it. Thank you very much for your time. If you have any questions or any comments, please feel free to share.
Okay, thank you, Martha. What is the takeaway that you'd like to leave with the class, the take-home message?
So the takeaway for me would basically be, automation is something that at this point in time, I believe is inevitable. The technology that is arising throughout the world, there are certain processes that will be automated. And we can see it as a negative thing, as a positive thing. I think the ethical dilemma part of it, that was the best example I could have found, but it really does make you think about, is it worth people losing their jobs, or is it worth your safety?
All right, thank you. So let's move on to our next presenter, Ms. Shanika. And while she's getting ready, I'm going to just take the attendance quickly. So please respond when I call your name.
Here, Miss.
Tidisha? Shanice? Juana?
Here, Miss.
Tiana?
Here, Miss.
Danielle?
Here.
Bonetta?
Here, Miss.
Dominique?
Here.
Karen? Keisha?
Here, Miss.
Martha?
Here.
Shanika?
Here.
Zolmi? Diona?
Here, Miss.
Gabriel?
Here, Miss.
Darla?
Here, Miss.
Jalen? Annalie?
Here.
Annalie?
Here, Miss.
Okay. The persons I have marked absent are Zulmi, Karen, Shanice, and Tidisha. Group leaders, do you know what's happened to your group members? Tidisha, Shanice, Karen, and Zulmi?
I assume Zoom is at work.
Okay. Make sure you update them on the assignment. And because when they miss class, then they miss out some important stuff. So you want to make sure you pass the information on to them. Okay. All right, Ms. Shanika, the floor is yours.
Can I miss good night, class? Tonight I'm going to be presenting on how harmful smartphones are. And we're going to be looking at a few objectives from the case study, which is to identify the problems described, if there is any ethical dilemmas, should restrictions be placed on children's and teenagers' smartphone use, and can the problem of smartphone reducing cognitive skills be solved? Now, just a brief history as to how the smartphone started. It was basically invented back in 1992 and released in 1994 by the company called IBM. It was called the Simon Personal Communicator, and this smartphone had far less feature than our current cell phones. They had calendar, address book, notepad, and the cell phone was also being able to use for sending and receiving emails, as well as text messages. Back then, this device, as you can see in the picture, which is just one big blob, it actually costs over $1,000. And that's like 24 years ago. This particular amount of money was not as easy to get. So by the 6 months after launch, this particular product was taken off the market. Before that, it was actually reduced to $599 with a 2-year contract, and they still weren't able to make as much sales. The reason being this device was taken from the market is because it was deemed too far in advance for the people living back then. Since this case study that we're going to be looking at talks about the provider Apple and the iPhones that they created, we're going to be looking at iPhone's first invention, which was the iPhone 2G, and this launched back in 2007. And as you know, that over the years, there have been several different smartphones that were created. This iPhone was basically a 3-in-1 device. What Apple did was they combined an iPod music player, an internet communication device, and just a regular traditional phone to make this particular iPhone here. Thereafter, in the market, there are different devices that came into play from Nokia, other companies as well. But if you notice, all the phones that is in the market in today's society basically look like an iPhone. It took the functionality, the interface, basically most of the features is the same. It might be branded with a different name, however, it basically looks the same. So what iPhone did was basically set a high trend for today's now smartphone. There are quite a few disadvantages and advantages that comes with using a smartphone. As we take a look at the advantages, it's basically creating a way for easier communication. It's more modernized and it makes interaction easier and instantly. For web surfing, I know there was a desktop computer back then, but with the use of a smartphone now, it allows users to use the website and search and review anywhere at any time instead of going on the desktop. We now have GPS features installed, and for the educational purposes, you're able to watch instructional videos and literature for your assessments. Some of the disadvantages include distraction. People lose attention when they hear the slightest bit of notification, both in school, in your workforce. It's very costly. Some of us might even go into debt trying to keep up with the latest fashion trend to afford these new devices. It also introduced health problems. And a research mentioned that 27% of our 8th graders who uses social media heavily are at a higher risk for depression. So think about the children that you have. If you have kids, myself, I have a 10-year-old. She have an iPad. But if we do not limit the use of these devices, it can very well lead to those type of health problems. It is very addictive. You might even wake up. I know myself, I wake up in the morning, and before I even say good morning to everyone in the home, the first thing I do is check my phone. And I'm pretty sure that some of us can relate. So it's very addictive. The uncensored contents, it comes unintentionally at times. It comes as maybe a pop-up on your phone, on your computer, your laptop, your iPad. And that is one of the downsides as well to quick access to the internet. It opens rooms for material that can be violent, and it also portray adult content. The research that we are looking at here, it talks about smartphone, and it impacts that the way that we think, the way we behave, especially among children. The study speaks about an open letter to Apple back in 2018 that was written from the New York-based JANA Partners and the California State Teachers Retirement System. They stated that the firm must do more to help children fight smartphone addiction. And the investors urged Apple to offer tools to prevent smartphone addiction and to provide more of a parental option for monitoring their children's smartphone usage. And they also shared the negative effects of heavy smartphone and social media use on the mental and physical health of children whose brains are still developing. These negative effects range from distractions in the classroom, a higher risk to suicide and depression. Some of them suffered mental and physical health while they're still developing. It also talks about the reduction of cognition skills. It basically diminishes the capacity of concentration and contemplation. The research by the psychology in this study, the Professor Twenge of San Diego State, they stated that teenagers who spend 3 hours a day or more on an electronic device are 35% more likely, and those who spend 5 hours or more are 71% more likely to have a risk factor for suicide than compared to those who spend less than 1 hour. So as a parent, what we want to do or what we can do to avoid these health issues is to limit, even though it's not 100% given by Apple for all of the devices, maybe we give you a time limit, but it can be easily bypassed. What you want to do is you want to, take that initiative to limit your child. So in this letter, they also suggested that Apple enable parents to specify the age of the users for the phone during setup. Perhaps they want to establish limits to the screen time. The Apple devices that we have at home, if you have one, if you try to set up a Google and you link that Google account to the device, it actually tells you the limit. But from experience speaking, I've set time limit to certain apps, but not the entire phone or the entire app iPad per se. So that is something that I think it is a great suggestion. Another suggestion from the investors is that Apple needs to select the hour of day the phone can be used and also block social media devices. And this plays a role into the ethical part of it, especially with schools, because cell phones, it basically includes problems like cyberbullying, cheating at schools, and more life-threatening issues like terrorist attack, but we don't want to per se go into that route. But if we look at the cheating in Belize per se, most high school, for instance, let's say Edward P. Arc, they have this rule whereby students are allowed to bring their phone to school, especially those who are traveling out district and their parents need to get in contact with them. But they must leave the cell phone at the clerical office. Now, if in the event one of these children or these students take the phone in class and they forget to turn off the the notification bell or, put it on vibrate. One little notification that pops in disrupts the entire class. And say if they're doing an assessment, the phone can be used for cheating. And this also become more of a teen thing, taking the phone on campus, maybe even in class, and then it becomes an issue for the entire class being disruptive. Taking a look at one of the questions from the study, it asked, should restrictions be placed on children and teenagers' smartphone use, and why? For this, I say yes. And the reason being is directed back to the research, because the research also tells us that an average teen in the US gets a phone at 10 years old. They spend over 4.5 hours a day on it. 78% of 78% of these teens that have access to these devices check their phone every single hour. And 50% of them report feeling addicted to their phone, meaning that if they're just sitting at home, they're not reading a book, they're not doing chores, they want to be on this device. They hear this phone ring, they instantly just want to go check what's happening. Are my friends texting me? What's the new trend going on? What's happening on Facebook? And if you take time to read the study as well, out of 2,300 survey that was sent out to the teachers, they report that 6 to 7% of the students, they're being distracted by the digital technologies in the class. So my answer to that is yes, and the restrictions most definitely needs to be placed, because it allows our kids to be refocused in class, and it actually improves their grades as well. Another question says, can the problem of smartphone reducing cognitive skills be solved? And for this one, I'm at an impasse, because Nicholas Carr in the study, he studied the impact of technology in business and culture. And he shared that even though he recognized the smartphone provide many useful functions in a very handy form, this usefulness also gives them too much influence on their attention, their thinking, their behavior. And what smartphone does, it shapes our minds and the thoughts as well. And it makes it very complicated. It also affects persistency, even when we aren't using the device. The research suggests that the intellect is actually weakening our brain growth development, and it is basically allowing us to want to use this device in order for us to advance. Some other research that was conducted shows that there are some limitation to the connection between the smartphones and cognitive skills. They do not know the extent to which smartphones impact the brain growth. Therefore, more study needs to be conducted to broaden the relationship between the habits of using the cell phone and what exactly it's being effective. Melcher, in this study in 2013, they also pointed out that the most recognizable impact of smartphone technology is in our everyday lives, and it interferes with our mental and physical task. Like I mentioned earlier, that the first thing that someone would do is get up and look at their phone. Maybe your phone might have had an alarm, but you scroll through your phone from one app to the next. Someone's mic is on.
Dominique, mic is on.
Yes, so back to the technology. The physical task that we're referring to here is you open your phone, you go ahead and you disable your alarm for the day. However, if you get a notification pop in from Instagram, automatically your mind goes to Instagram. You click on that app and you start going from there. And it basically takes away of what needs to be done in the home before going to work. You end up being late because we're being on the device. Further evidence also suggests that the mere presence of a cell phone may impact your cognitive performance again. It relates back to you can just be sitting in class or sitting at work and you have your phone on your desk. But having the phone there is like you're waiting for something to happen. And the moment that notification bells ring, you're off to that phone, going from app to app to app. And it takes away from your responsibility in the job. Now, as it relates to Belize, it would be much on a smaller scale due to the population size. The household income is less when compared to other countries. UNICEF mentioned that about 43% of the household in Belize is a one-parent household. So the access of a cell phone or an iPad at the age 10, if your parents can afford it, then I believe that, in my eyes, will be good for the child, enables them to further develop. Some of us have limited access to the internet, and you could have seen this when COVID hit 2.5, 3 years ago, that the school had to be distributing packages because some of the students were not able to do online learning. Also in Belize, the Apple devices are so costly. So instead of using Apple devices, they go to the alternative option. The country is also still developing and adapting to new technology. So in this sense, I would say that for Belize, it is not primarily a hard no when it comes to the technology being available. However, it's more of a cost thing. If your parents are not able to afford it, then that is an option that's not available for you. So there is still room for growth here in Belize, and with not having the ability to have a phone at an earlier age, like mentioned, it basically helps the child to further develop. Just two takeaway points here when it comes to the recommendation. As a parent, I would limit the use of device from an earlier age if not required by the school. Even at home, I've started to implement having the device 1 hour a day, and it has to be something educational. I'm just recommending this here, closely monitor the apps being installed on these devices, because some of these games like Roblox, you might not notice as a parent, but if your child plays Roblox, there's this little feature in this game where they're able to send messages. And the people playing these games are not always kids. They're grown adults, grown people, and the messages that are coming in, they're not nice. So those are just my two recommendations for this. If you have any questions, I'm here. And these are my references. Thank you.
Thank you, Shanika and Martha. Those were two very good presentations. I just like two persons from the class, just to encourage our two presenters. What were two things that you learned? One from Martha's presentation and something you learned from Shanika's presentation. Any two persons in the class?
Hi, Miss. Good night, class. From Miss Martha's presentation with the brewery, I don't usually buy, or I'm not usually aware about the various beers and stuff that Belize have. So I was not aware that some of them were in cans, and that's best believed that since they're in cans, they're more machine made and less man made, which she mentioned would be an effect on employees. not necessarily losing their job, but serves as a demotivation. When they would have the battles, they had more used to do the battles and stuff. It limits what they can do, and that could be a form of demotivation for them. From Ms. Shanika, when I fully agree what she said about technology and on a whole with the cell phones and these various search engines and the different like she said, parental control and stuff needed for especially for children. And in schools, they do have negative effects on them. They do have the benefits as well. Like she mentioned about the various high school, allowing students to have these devices in cases of emergencies. Here down south, Tancred Community High School recently started that just as something after COVID, where they allow students to bring devices on certain days. And of course, the devices are misused and the problem arises. She also mentioned a fact there from maybe not too much technology related, but about the household, with the majority having single parent household. So there were two well composed presentations tonight, and I did learn a lot.
Thank you, Tiana. Is there anyone else? Okay, I know you guys are thinking about it, but we did have some very good presentations. They have added their slides to the spreadsheet, and I really appreciate the investment in research. You could hear it from the presenters that they went outside of the article and they looked for supporting documents. It was well put together, and I value that because it shows that you are learning on your own and you can apply it. You also shared tips with us, things that we can benefit from. For those of you who have children, Shanika mentioned something very important if your children are playing some of the games that she mentioned. One thing that I know personally, as a child, we had to retain a lot of information. I had to be quick with numbers and I was good with numbers, and now I struggle just to do some basic math. I have to take out my calculator just to verify if I'm right or wrong. And we had to remember a lot of historical facts. Now I have to go on Google to check what are some of the historical dates that I needed to remember. I know my dependence on the cell phone and the smart devices has caused that. I don't know about your generation when you were going to school, if it was the same, where you had to retain quite a bit. We had to know times table, we had to know just about everything. And calculators were allowed, but they encourage us not to rely on them for the same reason. So when you had your examinations, you could have quickly calculated and gotten your answers correctly without the use of a calculator. So very important. Thank you all for sharing. On Thursday when we meet, we'll be spending the time going over what you guys have been working on and breaking down the analytics part of the research project. So I encourage you to bring your groups with you and bring anything that you've started working on so that as we meet, we can go through your documents and what you've started. If you haven't started writing as yet, still bring what you have. If you just have the conceptual framework for your project, come with that. Bring questions, any concerns that you have regarding your final project, bring those to class on Thursday. All right, enjoy the rest of your evening, ladies and gentlemen. I will see you on Thursday, and I hope you have a good one.
Hi, Miss, before you go quick.
Yeah.
You on the Moodle platform, you had a little slot open for you to submit, I believe, the survey or something like that, right?
That's right.
I sent ours, but I didn't see you respond to group 2's yet. So I'm just wondering if you're gonna get to it.
Can you wait a second? Just let me check quickly.
Okay.
All right. Is there anyone else who submitted and you didn't get a response from me? I'm just making sure because I saw some of them pretty late. Just a minute.
I think we also added you to the a Google form because when you sent out the initial survey, we've already created it, so we didn't really make much changes. So we've added you to that as well.
Okay. All right. But your form matched the framework that we were using, right? The Delona McLean?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so that was all I was really concerned about. Let's see. Just a minute.
You did mention there's like a introduction that's supposed to be there, so I think we might just need to edit that part.
Okay. Even if you sent it separately, that's fine, but it must be included somewhere, either in the email or, yeah, I saw Starlet's, and then I put a comment there under her submission. Shanika, okay, yes, I see yours here. Let me see if I had commented on yours as well. Oh no, I didn't comment on yours.
Yes, you did. I just see it. It says, "Hi, Shanika, your group may proceed with the data collection."
Okay,
sorry.
I'm not seeing it on mine though. For some reason, I don't know.
Oh, okay. It didn't send me a notification, but now that I went back in it and I saw like one little thing that says comment, I did see it. So we'll just send out the forms then. Thank you, Miss.
Okay, no problem. All right, ladies and gentlemen, enjoy your evening.
You too, Miss. Bye.
Good day.
Miss, can I just speak to you for just a couple minutes after everyone leaves?
Sure.
Good night, Miss.